Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. This is my weekly wrap-up for the week ending Saturday, May 10th. I did a separate video this week to talk about all of the things that I had read for Horror Mayhem, and I'm going to put a link to that in the notes below because I'm not going to talk in any detail about all of the things that I read for Horror Mayhem in this video. I'm just going to mention them. The theme is decades of dread, and the goal is to read short horror fiction that represents a variety of different decades. So I began by reading in American Supernatural Tales, and I also read from my collection of poetry and prose by Edgar Allan Poe. I read stories from the 1820s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Then I jumped into the 20th century and I read Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. This is a novella, and I read this as a buddy read with Gareth from Books, Songs, and Other Magic. Gareth has talked about this book in a couple of videos, and I talked about it at length also in my Horror Mayhem video. We both adored this book, really, really enjoyed it, and enjoyed discussing it with each other. And I'm definitely going to be reading more Shirley Jackson for this Horror Mayhem. I have a collection of her short stories, and I'm going to be digging into those very, very soon. And then finally, this week, I've also been reading for Horror Mayhem Stephen King's You Like It Darker. This is a collection of short stories that he published in 2024. And this is a buddy read that I'm doing with my friend Alan at Alan's Reads. We read the first 3 stories and had a meeting where we discussed them, and then we read 2 additional stories. One is really a novella. It was about 150 pages, and we're going to have that discussion later today. So we've already completed the first 5 stories in this 12-story volume. We've divided up the book so that we could spread it out over the course of the month, but we're moving pretty quickly. We're moving more quickly than our original schedule. We're about halfway finished with the book, and I think we are in agreement that this is a mixed bag. This is a mixed collection. There are some stories that are really, really terrific, and others that are you know, they're okay. I mean, I haven't read anything that was really terrible yet, but I don't think either one of us is in love with this book so far. I mean, we have a couple. We have several to go. So I'll be talking about this in subsequent videos. But I'm definitely enjoying the experience of talking about the collection with Alan. We are also reading in Angelia's group, Angelia at Read and Reread. Her group is Endless Drama, and we are reading 2 plays this month by Arthur Miller. This week I read Death of a Salesman, or rather I should say I reread this because this is a play that I've read many times because it's one that we used to teach. And this is a pretty standard fare, in American high schools. I think I read it for the first time in 10th or 11th grade. I can't remember. I'm not sure which. And it's one that we taught in our 10th grade American Lit curriculum. It is a heartbreaking play, and I think it affects me even more deeply now. Than it did when I was teaching it. It's a play about a family in crisis. It's a play about fathers and sons. There are lots of sets of fathers and sons all through the play. It's a play about the American dream. That was how we always taught it, as kind of an example of what happens to people when the promise of the American dream is not fulfilled. And it's also about a man's break with reality. Willie Loman, the main character of the play, he's in a crisis. He's in several crises. Not appreciated at work. Doesn't feel particularly appreciated anywhere that he goes, but he's having a mental breakdown, and he's really having a break with reality in a lot of parts of the play. So it's a heartbreaking drama. We're having a thoughtful and thought-provoking discussion about it in Angelia's Discord. And then in the second half of the month, we're going to be reading, also by Arthur Miller, The Crucible, another play that I frequently taught. And then the Ulysses, the Finnegans Wake Readalong continues. So we are still forging ahead with Finnegans Wake, and I am on my own continuing with Richard Ellman's biography of James Joyce. This is a masterpiece. I am 18 chapters into this tome. Where I am in the biography, Joyce has at this point written and published a book of poetry. He is in the process of publishing Dubliners. He has been working on the portrait of the artist as a young man. While he is not yet writing Ulysses, and certainly not writing Finnegans Wake yet, I am seeing echoes of both of those works in some of the things that are going on in his life. These are things that are eventually going to make their way in a disguised form into both Ulysses and Finnegans Wake. With regard to Finnegans Wake, as I've talked about in a couple of videos now, this is a non-linear story. We started reading in kind of in the middle of the book. We started with chapter 5. Our group has now read chapters 5 through 8. I have gone back and read chapters 1 through 4 as well. So technically I have read chapters 1 through 8. It doesn't really matter where you start this book. Roy from Roy Reads Anything, who actually started this read along, he developed the schedule, based on some advice that he had received about which chapters were the most accessible, and that's why we started where we started. But I think we're all in agreement that it doesn't really matter where you start. The novel even begins, having gone back and read chapter 1 and chapters 1 through 4, it starts in the middle of a sentence, and that same sentence comes up again at the end of the book. So the book is really a circle, and you can kind of jump in any place. I've been talking for a couple weeks now about the experience of reading this book and talking about the difficulty that I have in talking about the novel. Some of the time that I'm reading it, I feel like I'm in the middle of very disturbed thinking and language. It was commonly known, or it is commonly known, that that Joyce was writing this novel as his only daughter was becoming increasingly more disturbed. She was very, very unwell. She was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia. She was hospitalized, and she would spend the rest of her life in mental hospitals. It was known that Joyce was the only person who could really communicate with her. He could understand her sort of rapid thought jumps, and he could make sense out of her schizophrenic language, which is it's very disordered language. It's disordered thinking, and some people say that that language, her language, and the language that he came to understand was part of the inspiration for writing this book the way that he did. And in some of what I read this week, I felt that really, really strongly. But then at other times, I just feel like, this language, this kind of complicated language, sometimes playful language, is just sort of washing over me. And I keep coming back to this idea of feeling like I'm walking around a dreamscape. I feel like I don't understand what I'm reading, but I love to listen to it. I'm listening to two different recordings. One is, just an audible recording of the whole novel, but I'm also listening to small episodes of it being read by the One Little Goat Theater Company in Toronto. And those readings are very, very dramatic. And even though a lot of the language doesn't make sense, the intonations of the reader, and I'm following along, it sounds like normal speech. It sounds, people in the audience are laughing, like it seems like at appropriate times, even though nobody really knows what is being said. So, I just feel like I'm in the middle of this dream that makes sense when you're in the middle of the dream. And we've all had that experience where, crazy things happen in dreams and they make perfect sense in the story of the dream. But when you're awake and you then try to make sense out of it, or you try to, write it down, or you try to explain it to somebody else, it's very hard to do. And it doesn't... It doesn't make sense, and that's so that's sort of what this feels like. But I have been helped, I think, by just kind of giving up on the impulse to try to make sense out of everything that I'm reading. And I say that even as I am reading all these complementary texts, that help you to follow what's going on. So some part of me is always trying to make meaning, but another part of me is kind of giving in to this, to just sort of letting this wash over me, so to speak, and then to see what sense I can make out of it. There are recurring images, there are recurring characters, but they change shape and form. They come back as different people. It's just kind of fun to be sort of puzzling it out and seeing, oh yeah, I've seen this before, or I've heard this before, or this is something that relates to something in Ulysses, and we just read that last year. So there are lots of sort of puzzles to be figured out, and I'm having fun with that, and I just read little bits of it. I read little bits each day. I listen in, these two different forms, and I read some of my complimentary texts. I think this is going to take a long time to finish. Our read along is going through the month. It was April, May, and we're going to be going through June, but that is not even going to complete the whole novel. I guess we'll see what happens at the end of June, whether, we keep going or everybody just kind of keeps going on their own or not. I'm not really sure, but this is doing something for me. There is something to be said for immersing myself in this each day, even if it's just to read a few pages of the text. And so we will be continuing on, and you'll be hearing me talk about this for a little bit longer. Certainly through the rest of May and into June. So that's what I've read this week. That's what I've been up to. So as always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.